Hey, I'm Steven from Rugged Rocks, and this is part two of the TrailComm series. Part one, we went over antennas and antenna placement on your vehicle, and today we're going to talk about coax. And coax is the cable that plugs that connects the radio to the antenna, and it's a very crucial part of getting your radio to work properly. And it's important that you understand some basic do's and don'ts of what coax to use and how to treat the stuff, because it's pretty sensitive, the coax cables. So here in this picture, we've got a common type of coax is RG58. This is what you get when you buy just off-the-shelf antennas, mag mounts that just magnet to the top of your roof, or pre-terminated cables that have your connectors on them already. 99% of the time, this is what's thrown in there. This is not very good stuff that has a lot of loss, so you actually lose a lot of your transmit and receive power through RG58. As we go up in line or in sizes here, the efficiency becomes better, but no coax is perfect, and frankly it all sucks, but it's just a necessary evil. So all coax is very lossy, which is why it's very important to just kind of make the best of the situation, which is the point of this video. So beyond RG8, this stuff starts to get pretty big. This is almost half an inch thick. This is about 1/4 of an inch thick, and this is just shy of 1/4 of an inch thick. So in mobile installations, RG8X is what I use because it's a good improvement in loss over RG58, but it's not much difference in size. So the performance to size ratio is much better in my opinion. So this is something to keep in mind. Coax or transmission lines in general do get bigger than this. You'll see even stuff along the lines of this stuff, which is called Helix, or also more broad term would be hardline. And this stuff goes up in size up to about 1 7/8 inches. So this stuff gets absolutely huge and also gets insanely expensive. But just to show you guys a kind of a spread spectrum of different types of transmission lines. Now, one of the things you want to know about coax is you don't want to kink it or just bunch up excess, because what actually happens is, if we go back here, when you kink it or bend it, smash it, you change the relationship between the inner conductor here and this outside shield, because this is a carefully tuned circuit in itself, and this insulator in the middle is a certain thickness, a certain type, that's all been taken into careful consideration for the radio waves that are going to be coming through here. And if you disrupt that relationship between the center conductor and this outside shield, you're going to make performance even worse. Again, coax is not efficient, and anything you do, stuff like this, is going to just make it even worse. The radio waves not only just dissipate throughout the cable, but they also, when things start to get wonky, the radio waves start to reflect back to the radio, affecting the tuning of the antenna and making the radio itself even less efficient. So it's a really slippery slope when you start talking about efficiency in radio setups. It just becomes this compounded issue, and just stay away from bunching stuff up like this. Just another quick picture here. And this thing is bunched up and has just been jammed behind this tire carrier here for a really long time, and you don't want to do that. But we'll talk about alternatives as well. Here's another one. This one really makes me cringe. It's zip tied to the tire carrier and has this nice kink in it. This is terrible. Don't do this. Again, the coax has a very specific relationship to that inner conductor and the outer braid, that shield. So using non-RF connectors such as this ring terminal is not good. Stay away from any antennas that try to use stuff like this. Very rarely does this actually work, and more common, it will corrode and Even if you do get it working right, it's not a good long-term solution anyway. So don't do this. Stay away from using so many zip ties. Not to say zip ties are always bad, but we'll go over that in a second as well. Moving on, this piece of coax here on this installation had like a RG58 type coax coming into it, and this particular setup steps down to an even smaller, even less efficient piece of coax. This setup is intended for when you have to kind of snake your coax through like a door jamb and to get out to like a lip mount or maybe a mag mount or different types of mounts on the outside of the vehicle without drilling holes in your car. You only want to use this type of coax when you absolutely have to, because it's even more fragile, and you're losing even more power here. In this case, this is on a tire carrier, and it's not fishing through any tight spaces or anything. It's actually completely unnecessary. So you don't want to do that either. And here's just another quick look at it. It goes onto the Schrockworks bumper antenna mount here, and that small coax comes in here, and this is all bad. Don't do this. So here's actually an okay example of using zip ties. You can use zip ties to keep things in place, but don't over tighten the zip ties to where you're squashing the cable. I typically put the cable right here at where the two ends of the zip tie come together, and I just make it snug so you can still move it around a little bit, but not so tight that it can't move and you're potentially affecting that relationship between that center conductor and that outer shield. That's really what all of this comes down to. It's not complicated, it's just looking at different things here. Now, in the back of the Schrock bumper, this is actually pretty cool how they have a hole right here to fish stuff through. This works out really well. As you can see, the coax comes through in a nice sweep and just goes right, passes right through and underneath the truck. In the last video, we talked about the roof-mounted stuff. So this is a type of mount that I've used for a really long time. It's called an NMO mount. I might want to write that down, but we'll revisit it later on as well. This NMO mount requires a 3/4 inch hole to be drilled in your roof or mounting tab or whatever you're going to use. And the centerpiece here that has these two holes in it comes up from the bottom, and then this outer ring screws in on top. And in case you're wondering, it is watertight. So what I typically like to do when I first install these is I will wash the vehicle, wax the paint, and then when this ring goes on, there's actually a weatherproof or weather-tight like O-ring seal that gets a flush seal all the way around the paint. So it's important that you have nice, clean, waxed paint so it has a nice flat surface for the O-ring to tighten on. And it sits in a groove on this outer nut and sticks out just enough so when you tighten it down, it seals on the paint. If installed properly, you won't have any water leaking issues. It's really not hard to do. I've done many of them on my vehicles over the years and have never had one water leaking problem. Just take your time, make sure things are clean, do it once, do it right, and it'll hold up for a really long time. So this is an example of on the back of my Pathfinder. Granted, it is rusty, but it still has a good ground connection underneath all that rust, because this NMO mount, this is the bottom of the NMO mount, has been in contact with this mounting tab for many years, and it's rusted because this NMO mount needs to have a good ground for most types of antennas, right? Like we talked about before. If you're going to do a half-wave antenna, maybe not quite so crucial, but if you're going to attempt to use a quarter or a 5/8 wave antenna on a tire carrier against my recommendations, you need to do everything you can to make sure the ground here is tied to the ground of the rest of the vehicle. So I actually have this was bare metal, tightened that down, and then I have a copper braid that bridges from it just goes across the hinge basically. It grounds the actual tire carrier to the vehicle, and it allows the tire carrier to open and close and just hinges there. And so that's how I've done it. The zip ties come in play down here on the tire carrier. Again, not so tight that it squashes it and just holds it in place and does its job just fine. And again, I am using that RG8X coax because it's a little bit lower loss. Same thing, just some more zip ties, and then that goes underneath the hinge, behind the bumper, and into a hole that was pre-existing in the body. These holes are all over vehicles all the time, typically plugged up with a rubber plug. You can look under seats, behind various panels of your vehicle, in the firewall. Just got to lift up carpet sometimes and you'll find rubber plugs for holes that just go straight through. Either pop a hole through those rubber plugs and feed your coax through so it has a weather tight seal, or in other spaces such as this one where it's not that crucial, you can just fish the coax through and then put the connector on the other end, which brings me to the next part. The connectors, you should really know how to put these connectors on yourself, because if you get pre-terminated cable, you're going to end up with excess like we saw in some of the earlier pictures, and it's just gonna be a mess. You really want to, in mobile installations, in my opinion, keep the coax as short as possible. Again, this stuff is really lossy, so the less of it that you have to use, the better off you are, and the less of it you have in play, the less excess you have, and the less excess you're having to deal with, which is going to eliminate those kinks and smashes and stuff that we were talking about earlier. So don't be afraid to lop the connector off the end of your coax and solder a new one on. The way it works is with the proper measurements. By stripping the insulation in the various layers of the coax, you can take off the insulation, the outer jacket here, exposing the braided shield, and then you have this insulator in between the shield and the center conductor. And once you have this laid out in a similar fashion here, this connector, this RF connector, is called a PL259, and I'll provide links to that in a later video on where to get these by themselves. But this basically slides over the top of this coax and basically self-threads onto this jacket, so you have to spin it on. Sometimes you have to use a pair of pliers because it gets pretty tight, but just screw it on there nice and snug, and then come back with a hot soldering iron and solder the holes in here, and make sure that the shield that you can see in the hole has a proper solder connection in each one of the holes around the connector, and then the center conductor needs to be soldered at the tip of the center conductor coming out of the PL259 connector here. Now in this example, this is the larger RG8 coax cable, but if you're going to run RG58 or RG8X, the smaller stuff, then you're going to use a reducer, like demonstrated here. So you strip it in a similar fashion to the way you do it here, but you leave a lot more braid sticking out, and when you slide this reducer piece on, you just fold the braid over the top, and then you end up with a similar situation, being able to see the braid from the coax in here, and you solder it just like you did, or like you would with this RG8. So that's in a nutshell. I tried to do this quick. I hope you guys kept up with me on this one, but that's the scoop on doing this stuff. So main things are: keep your coax short, don't kink it, don't smash it, be nice to it, and have good solder connections on your connections. So I hope that helped you guys out understand coax a little bit better. In the next video, we're going to talk about different kinds of radios and different radio services. Stay tuned for the next one. Thanks for watching.